And so thank you all for being here. Thank you to the newcomers, particularly Adele from Atlanta. Welcome. And to our very good friend Hal in Palm Desert. Please note that the views expressed in this presentation are mine and mine alone. They do not necessarily express the views of Chabad of Arizona or Smile on Seniors. Okay, there we go. Sefarad, an amateur filmmaker with a $1.2 million budget donated by the community to make this movie. The movie was shown in 2019 at the Miami Jewish Film Festival, the Toronto Film Festival, the UK Jewish Film Festival, the Milwaukee Film Festival, Nashville Jewish Festival, Washington Film Festival, the New York Sephardic Film Festival, and more. I'm going to start off with the usual trailer.
Com o édito da expulsão, com a Inquisição, os judeus foram obrigados a sair do país. Oficialmente, os judeus desapareceram.
Judeus secretos.
A viver em Belmonte e em algumas aldeias a norte de Portugal. Continuam a praticar os seus rituais, escondidos nas suas casas, com medo.
Quem são estes homens?
São marranos.
The Jews are deeply divided on this matter.
The Marranos will never understand and adapt to the strict requirements of our religion, our culture, and our history.
They are descendants of the victims of the fires of the Inquisition.
Nossos irmãos escondidos precisam da nossa ajuda. Eu tenho um sonho. Construir uma grande e imponente sinagoga. It will be the largest synagogue in Portugal.
There's no shortage of synagogues the world over that are empty, even derelict.
Don't you believe in me?
O que destrói comunidade é carta anónima, é inveja.
Se eu falhar, se eu cair, se eu adoecer, se o meu bom nome for posto em causa, pode tudo ruir da noite para o dia. Estamos sob a mira do Estado.
Agora, mais do que nunca, todas as cautelas são poucas.
José Sorrel, Artur Carlos de Barros Basto.
Minha vida será toda investigada.
Até onde irão?
And this means that Jews and Judaism exist once more in Portugal.
So, Sefarad is a film, it's an unlikely blow against Ashkenormativity, difficult words to pronounce. The pattern of intra-Jewish antagonism deepening with the adoption of American racial hierarchies. Today, it constitutes a structurally embedded dynamic of American Jewish life that imagine the fusion of Ashkenazi Jewishness and whiteness as the normative, predominant and only legitimate way of being, acting, and representing Jewish. The assumptions are so banal as to be largely invisible until they are explicitly invoked to police the boundaries of the real, i.e. Ashkenazi white Jewish community. By default, other forms of Jewish identity and practice are relegated to the margins as mere tokens or exoticized novelty slideshows, or are deleted from the conversation outright, as is generally the case for Jews of color. The men's dress, probably Hasidic, though it's not quite clear from the movie, reflects the Ashkenazi cultural norms that a wider society sees as Jewish. Herring, kugel, and bagels are Jewish. Lachmania is a classic matzah, a small bite Syrian Jews often eat before dinner. Kube and karupi are not. Who is a Jew? What is authentic when it comes to Judaism? And can communities of different kinds of Jews coexist? This sumptuous and absorbing historical drama recounts the story of Jews in Portugal since 1496, when King Manuel prohibited Judaism. Officially, the Jewish community disappears, although in many villages, crypto-Judaism is kept alive. And it's not until the end of the Inquisition in the 19th century that Jews were slowly beginning to return to Portugal. A small community of Ashkenazi Jews settles in Oporto, and these are joined by a Portuguese military officer converted to Judaism, who soon begins to travel, sometimes on horseback, sometimes by train, seeking to bring back to official Judaism those who practice crypto-Judaism. This project, although heroic, does not have the desired outcome. But 5 centuries after King Manuel's edict led to the mass exodus of the Jewish community, a new law promoted their return to the land they had been forced to forsake. With a sweeping look, Sefarad is a timely film that will make you reflect on the true worth of faith, love, and selfless valor. Based on true events, the sweeping period piece sheds light on a small community of hidden Jews first heard of in the 19th century. Excuse me. As the descendants of Portugal's original Jewish residents, they lived in complete isolation for generations, believing that they were the last Jews on earth. They finally reconnect with their fellow Jews with the arrival of many refugees from Nazi-occupied Europe. Portugal becomes a vibrant Jewish center once more. These are the questions raised by a curious independent film named Sefarad. It tells the story of Arthur Carlos de Barros Basto, 1887 to 1961, a real-life army captain in 19th century Portugal, who converted to Judaism after discovering he had Jewish ancestors. The movie documents his attempt to build a community there, including the construction of the Kaduri Makor Chaim Synagogue, the largest in the Iberian Peninsula, in 1938. As construction begins on the magnificent structure in Porto, Barros Basto rides on horseback and train to meet crypto Jews living in remote villages. From what I can gather, this would be the approximate route by a train and horseback that Basto took. Porto is over here, and he went all the way up here. So it was quite a journey. He tells them that other Jews exist beyond Portugal, including in Central and Eastern Europe. One evening, he joins his host for a clandestine prayer at the village inn. Barros Basto is also made outreach efforts to fellow crypto Jews in northern Portugal, but they resisted his efforts to join the organized community. Adding insult to injury, he was expelled from the army after a tribunal convicted him of conduct unbecoming to an officer. Historical data compares his situation with that of another decorated Jewish veteran, Captain Alfred Dreyfus in France in the 1930s. As he fights for the legitimacy of the Marrano population, the other Jewish leaders rejected. In the process, he questions the Jewish establishment's authenticity and ability to adapt. However inartful, Sefarad is full of Jewish symbolism and raises questions that the Jewish community is still asking today in Israel and the diaspora. The movie follows the captain, a uniformed, decorated war hero, in a series of meetings, so many meetings, with the stern men with long beards and even longer coats. The serious men with their arcane rules and regulations about who is considered a Jew and therefore who has access to all the privileges that come along with that. In another scene, 3 rabbis debate about whether and how to respond to Captain Bastos' project of building a Portuguese Marrano community and whether and how the group should be integrated into the existing community. 2 rabbis seem excited by the prospect. One, unsurprisingly, disagrees. Marrano Jews are not to be confused with the Marrano glass factory in Venice. As a Marrano, the captain's Jewishness is constantly being tested. His ritual practice is always on probation. A few community members visit Basto and his family for Shabbat dinner to try and tease out whether, in their view, they are adequately Jewish. The Bastos are asked to recite the blessing on the candles and utter it in a way familiar to us. But the guests inform the family that they recite it differently. Upon request, the community leaders reciprocate with their version. They open their hands and chant a prayer in Judeo-Portuguese. Captain Basto responds in defense of his Jewish practice and the wider goal of building a Marrano community. What unites us is far greater than what divides us, he says, staking a claim for a multicultural Jewish community whose hallmark is diversity. The opposing rabbi says, it's romantic, quite wonderful that people still pray to God. Families that endured the edict of expulsion, all that. But frankly, we are not talking about Jews. We should make a distinction between crypto-Jews and Marranos. Crypto-Jews are when Jews have been persecuted and have had to hide their Judaism. Marranos are those simply ignorant of their Judaism. Crypto-Jewish rituals were highly syncretic. It is the combining of different beliefs while blending practices of various schools of thought. Syncretism involves the merging or assimilation of several originally discrete traditions and combining of different beliefs while blending practices of various schools of thought, especially in the theology and mythology of religion, thus asserting an underlying unity and allowing for an inclusive approach to other faiths, with a lot of Christianity and Judaism melded and morphed, and in some cases with a few Hebrew words inserted into the prayers. A lot is unrecognizable to what is diaspora Judaism today. It is a Talmudic difference. The rabbis discuss the implications of being the victims of the Inquisition and if the experience somehow makes them more Jewish. Their argument is similar to the current debate about descendants of Holocaust victims, and if their status somehow makes them more Jewish and are deserving of a seat at the table. The opposing rabbi continues, they've abandoned their practice years ago. What they practice is not Judaism, but Moranism. It has little to do with Judaism. It is similar to Judaism. Moranos will never adapt to Judaism as we practice it. The Moranos wish to fulfill their religion, but not the rigorousness of our religion, the mikveh, Shabbat, and fasting. The casual rejection of the Moranos' Jewishness with its differing values and practices sounds eerily similar to what some observant Jews say about the less observant. It has also reminded me of the biting joke that is said about Lubavitchers, that they practice the closest religion to Judaism. The rabbi in opposition also complains that no one can guarantee that the Moranos' matrilineal descent is not broken, which is an argument brought up to bar the citizenship of many newcomers to Israel. Moranism has little to do with Judaism, he says. They will never understand that we're adapted to the strict requirements of our religion, our culture, and our history. Gatekeepers define what is and isn't Judaism in a narrow way, walling off those inside the tent from those outside of it. Jews had three ways to confront their expulsion from Portugal during the Inquisition: to continue practicing Judaism in exile, to remain in Portugal as new Christians, or to practice Judaism in hiding as so-called Moranos and crypto-Jews. The film includes three of these: Judaism, Christianity, and Moranism, a religion specific to the Moranos. The film is often confusing because it's unclear who all the characters are and what the implications of their decisions will be. The lighting and cinematography are crude, the beards look fake, and the acting is sometimes stiff. Yet the film tells an important tale and raises many questions we still face as a community today. And speaking of Ashkenormalativity, it pairs well with a plate of herring and a glass of schnapps. The film closes with several notes of optimism. These pictures were emailed to me from Makor Chaim Synagogue, except, of course, for the captain's picture. In the movie, Isabel Barras Basto is shown playing with her grandfather's army cap as a child. She grew up to spearhead a petition to rehabilitate him, and she is today the vice president of Makor Chaim. Barras Basto was successfully reinstated by the Portuguese Parliament in 2013. That same year, Portugal welcomed the descendants of its expelled Sephardim to apply for citizenship. However, she added, an important fact that in Barras Bastos' case, the accusation came from an internal person within the Jewish community who brought to the attention of the authorities that he was doing something wrong. There was a whole court proceeding. They did not find him guilty, but the army felt his conduct was not worthy of or becoming of an officer. He got expelled with loss of pay, loss of rank, and everything. Barras Basto, forbidden from wearing the army uniform he once donned so proudly, continued to work to help his co-religionists at home and abroad, using Makor Chaim to shelter hundreds of Holocaust refugees from World War II. Yet the film depicts his realization that once the refugees left, the synagogue he had worked so hard to construct and fill would be largely empty. As he plays with his granddaughter Isabel late in life, he cannot help feeling bitter and betrayed. The current Jewish community of Porto is described as a flourishing and reaching out to Christian and Muslim neighbors, a worthy tribute to the protagonist of the movie. A decade ago, the tiny Jewish community of Porto didn't have enough money to hire a rabbi or even fix the roof of a synagogue. Today, this Orthodox congregation of 400 in northern Portugal has enough for both, along with a kosher hotel, a mikveh, a cantor, security guards, and a new museum. Barros Basto has long been held up as a hero by Porto Jews. After reconnecting with his Jewish identity, sacrificed during his career in the pro-fascist dictatorship of Antonio de Oliveira Salazar, Barros Basto devoted his life to helping other Jews make a similar journey. He died disgraced by the charges against him in 1961. But, they added, he never lost hope in the idea of cleaning his tarnished name and being reinstated with full rights in the military, stating on the day before his death, "One day they will do me justice." As a historical document, Sefarad has few weaknesses. In one scene, the actors are shown praying in what Ben Gurion University historian Eliezer Papo describes as the Ashkenazi rocking motion, not something the Sephardic Jews of Portugal were likely to do. But the film does get historical details right, including its depiction of Sephardic Jews praying with outstretched palms. Compared to the nonsense you see in Hollywood, Papa said, this film is right. I took the liberty of actually emailing Makor Chaim, the synagogue, and this is an email that I received. You probably won't be able to read it, but I'm going to read the contents of the email so you know what's there. So it's a letter from the Jewish community of Oporto. Dear Isidore, Shalom, it's a pleasure to hear from you. The current community, supported by philanthropic Jewish families and having its own financial resources, the Jewish community of Oporto is a legally constituted organization based in Portugal. It includes about 500 Jews, originally from more than 30 countries, and gathers around the same table all standards and degrees of observance of Judaism. Number one, at the end of the 19th century, Ashkenazi Jewish community was set up in Oporto, made up of Jews from Central and Eastern Europe. Number two, that community was commanded by a German industrialist named Antonio Goetz, who was the father of the internationally renowned businessman and photographer Carlos Cudel Goetz, born in 1897. Number three, in 1921, a soldier from the Portuguese army, Captain Barros Basto, was converted to Judaism. Number four, in 1923, Captain and 17 Ashkenazim officially founded an organization called Jewish Community of Oporto. Number five, in 1925, a number of Portuguese citizens came to Captain Barros Basto and said they still practiced Jewish rituals in secret in their homes. These were the Muranos. Number six, the Catholics did not accept the Muranos because they were Jewish, and the Jews refused to accept them as Jews because they were unable to prove uncontaminated matrilineal Jewish descent. Number seven, According to Jewish law, halacha, Marranos could only be considered Jewish if they agreed to undergo formal conversion to Judaism, which included accepting the mitzvot before a Beth Din. At the very best, they would have to do a giur lehumra, a conversion to remove all doubts. Number 8, since 1927, Captain Barros Basto went on several trips to, I have to pronounce these names, Tras os Montes and the Beiras to rescue crypto-Jews and communities that legally or illegally had been created in Villarreal, Barranca, Pinhel, and Covila, and other places. Captain Barros Basto traveled by train, on foot, on horseback, over difficult terrain in the face of many adversaries. Number 9, the rescue work has failed. In the light of Jewish law, halacha, the Marranos were not Jews, nor were they accepted as such in the world's synagogues. Within the Jewish community of Porto, the halacha observing members were opposed to the Marranos being considered Jews for purposes of a minyan. The Marranos would not agree to a formal conversion to Judaism because they considered themselves Jewish. The Marranos mistrusted the rescue work, which they believed was a movement of leaders conducted from London. The Marranos would not agree to do without the guidance of the Chazanot, which are female cantors, who guarded tradition and officiated at collective Marrano rituals. The Marranos could not read Hebrew and did not want to add anything to what they'd already practiced. The Marranos would not agree to give up Marrano rituals that were heretical in the light of Jewish law. Most Marranos were emigrating to European cities other than Porto. Many Marranos were assimilated through marriage with the Catholics. Number 10, this faithfully represents the total fiasco of the rescue work that took place during the first half of the 20th century, which is even truer when one considers the definitive extinctions of the official Marrano communities of Barranca, Villarreal, Pinhel, and Covila. Best, Beryl Rosenberg, Jewish community of Oporto. And then lastly, next meeting, mark the calendar for your next meeting. And I'm going to, that's the calendar.
You got to mute your mistake.
Okay. I'm just, before we open it to discussion, I'm just going to open the next movies that I've selected. So let's go. On Amazon, A Wing and a Prayer is a story about Al Schwimmer, who was a pilot in World War II and father to the Israeli Air Force. The second movie is My Italian Secret, which is an Italian bike rider who smuggled documents in the frame of his bike. The third movie, I'm going to go out on a limb, called The Peanut Butter Falcon. It's not a Jewish movie, but a number of you have asked for some feel-good movie. And this was made by the director of, what's it, that yellow Volkswagen. It was recommended to me by my son and daughter-in-law. So they didn't recommend Superman or something like that. A really, really good movie. And then on Netflix, The Catcher Was a Spy, the story about Morris Berg, who was a catcher, went to Japan and spied. And then I'm sure everyone realized that I was going to choose The Life Ahead, which is the the new Sophia Loren movie, played by Sophia Loren, came out on Friday. And then also The Angel, which is similar to The Catcher Was a Spy. He was the son-in-law of Anwar Sadat in Egypt just before the Yom Kippur War. And he warned the president not to go to war with Israel. He didn't listen, so he decided to turn over information and documents to the Israelis. So those are the movies. I will be sending out an email as soon as the meeting is over. You'll get it, so you'll see what's going on. I'm going to stop this. Okay. And then, are we all unmuted? I'm opening up the floor for discussion.
You know, there was a crypto-Jewish meeting with a rabbi that we attended, Rabbi Garcia.
Right.
In Arizona.
He came to my ORT meeting.
Yeah, who was responsible for finding crypto-Jews. And he said that he never realized that he was Jewish, but his grandfather, I think, used to take him down to the basement on Friday night
and light candles
and drink wine. And that's what started him to find out that he was a crypto-Jew.
He said one of the problems with his congregation was when they were looking for undocumented people, he said his Friday nights would go from 60 people down to 10.
So when I researched crypto Jews in the USA, the biggest community that I found is in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest community.
Yeah.
So
and they,
carry on, Ellen.
Well, and before him, there was an artist who was a crypto Jew and talked about how he found out he was Jewish. And he used to make those little figures that they sold on Fifth Avenue. But besides that, what was I going to say about? If you should happen to decide to do the spy who was, the one about Mo Berg.
Yeah.
My son distributed that film, and I have the address and phone number of the director of that film. If you you could probably contact her.
Which film was this?
The one about Mo Berg.
The Catcher Was a Spy.
The Catcher Was a Spy.
It was in the Jewish Film Festival, and she was here leading discussions about the film, and I got to bring her out to lunch, and I have her address and phone number. So if you should do that one, I have a connection.
So the interesting part about the movie is that
going back to the movie.
I never realized that there would be such a non-acceptance of Marranos. But it seems to me it's the non-acceptance by the ultra-religious side of the Jewish community worldwide, not so much the regular run-of-the-mill.
But don't you have the same problems with the Black Jews from Ethiopia and the Jews from China and India?
And Russia. And the Russian Jews that came to Israel. Hello, Levi, who's come back.
Well, I've been here, but once you start talking about Jewish law questions, I figure I might as well add my own little sense. No one, I don't think anyone does not accept them. I think the proper wording is just like if I came to America and said I'm a U.S. citizen, go prove it. I just washed up on your shore. Yesterday, 15 people showed up on a boat on the shores in Florida. They're Americans. Who am I to argue? So there's a document. We have a process. It's a very normal thing to ask for those standards to be kept. So I don't think anyone questions them. I think it's more like the onus of proof is on them. And if you can't prove it, then you have to take that, I think Issy used the word, a conversion, what we say in Hebrew, lechumra, which means just in case. We can't prove it, so we ask you to do this conversion.
Well, how do you prove that I mean, if I went someplace, and how do I prove that I'm Jewish?
That's a very good question. There's an entire book in Code of Jewish Law on proving lineage. So this is actually where does it come into practice? For weddings. So if two people come into the rabbi's office and say, we're Jewish, the rabbi can't just do a wedding. He has to prove that they're Jewish first. So there are different ways to do it. For many of you, it's going to be much easier than for your grandchildren. Why do I say that? Because you'll have documents of yourself that was done. If your wedding was done with a rabbi that vetted you, that's enough. And that will be enough for your grandkids if you don't throw out that document. For others, it might mean finding a picture of a loved one who's buried in a Jewish cemetery that they know vetted Jewish identity as well. So one of the greatest gifts you can give to your children and grandchildren are your documents. Instead of throwing out your wedding document, save that. If you have a picture of your grandparents' burial in Russia or in America, wherever it is, save that. And if you don't think they'll keep the document, scan it. Because those are so important for proving Jewish identity.
Excuse me.
Now, you could use memories and another person to corroborate, things like that. But documents are more powerful, obviously.
What about your birth certificate?
Your birth certificate?
Naming in the synagogue with the rabbi.
I don't have a birth certificate, just for the record.
He does.
I have an invitation to my bris.
No, we need a certificate. It's in the vault.
But I do know, you mentioned a good point.
Help Betty.
Anyone can have a bris, so it's not necessarily a good enough document. But I do know that you mentioned a very good point, because there are certain moels that will do a certificate just for this reason. You know, like they vetted the family before. So I don't know, like I don't know. That's a good question. Keep that too.
I had a question. I had a question about when I was a kid, there was a black synagogue in Harlem. I think they were supposedly Ethiopian Jews. I honestly don't know that. I was a young kid. The other thing is they had a documentary on public TV a couple of years ago about a group in Africa that were Kohanim. And I wanted to know how that would be, you know, how do we know that they're legit? You know, they did this supposedly with DNA.
Right.
My understanding was they did this with DNA to track. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know if that's acceptable with Chabad or not.
First of all, it's not about Chabad. Like none of the questions I mentioned just now were about Chabad. It's just about.
Judaism takes patriarchal, accepts patriarchal. Orthodox conservative Reconstructionist does not.
So I was saying it's not about Chabad. It's more about Jewish law. If we want to use the original law or not, that's what it boils down to. But the answer about the Kohen, I know I haven't really read much about it. The question is, can that DNA transfer through mothers as well? And if it can, then it wouldn't be a good enough proof because we follow the father. But I haven't read enough about it to answer any questions.
Sorry, go ahead, Adele.
Oh, yes. As far as documenting lineage, I've kept the Kaddish reminders from Hadassah and from the funeral homes, the Jewish funeral homes, you know, from my parents. Mm-hmm. Is that any proof of?
Well, the funeral homes might be good. The Kaddish reminders from Hadassah won't prove anything necessarily, but the funeral home, if you just keep one, at least they have a source where to start looking. A lot of the funeral mortuaries here require certain documents. So like they might keep it or they might have documented what they took as a document. But it's a good question. I mean, these are things that will only help. You know, if they remember their bubby going to shul, that's going to also help in a conversation. But as we, sadly, society we know. I don't have to share this. You see the families, some families have grandchildren who maybe never stepped foot in a shul. So it's much more difficult for them later when the question is going to come up to prove it. But people work on this. I will tell you, I'm going to use names because I think it's a great story. So for any of you who know the Reuben Taubman family here in Phoenix, Terry Taubman was the executive director of Beth Israel for like 30 years. So her daughter is a rabbi. Her name is Sadie. She married a person, Andy, and at their wedding, after their wedding, so my dad did their wedding, and then after the wedding they had a Sheva Brachot, and he shared a story. He said he wouldn't be married and he wouldn't be here today if not for my dad. So what's the story? His mother's Israeli. His father has since passed away, and his father was looking to move to Israel, marry this woman, but in Israel they wouldn't accept him as Jewish unless he proved he's Jewish, right? Which means there would be no marriage ceremony. He couldn't make Aliyah, all the different problems. So he came to all the different rabbis. He was not Orthodox or anything close to observant like that, but he went to each rabbi that could help him in Arizona, and none of them, they said, we don't know you, we don't know your family. They wouldn't even take his phone call. So he called my dad, and my dad said, let's sit down, let's try to figure it out together, which they did. So my dad sent a letter to Israel with him, and that's how he was able to marry his wife, and that's how Andy was able to be born, and that's how Andy married Sadie. So people have to want to help, first of all, because there's no impossibles. Yes, with the Moranos, it's almost impossible. It's so many generations, and just because you had candles doesn't mean enough. And I want to add one thing that I think is interesting to note. Sometimes these conversions are actually for their benefit. So in Jewish law, if you don't get a get, if you don't have a divorce, a proper divorce, and then you remarry and you have children, your children are deemed an illegitimate child in Jewish law, right? A mamzer, as we say in Hebrew. And there was a proper civil divorce, right? It wasn't like an adulterous kid, but the law dictates what you need to end the marriage and to remarry. So if we know that a community did not do these laws and there are remarriages and divorces, we're kind of protecting their children by saying, do this, it's gonna help not just yourself but other generations. But again, I do also understand the sensitivity in this, so I don't question anyone who questions it. But the bigger picture is it's just a standard that we have to keep.
I thought of a funny line.
The vetting.
Save the foreskin. Save.
Yeah, but that won't work. Although that would be a funny joke.
I just said, if you save the foreskin, did that?
Not responsible for this.
You don't know that every mall has a foreskin forest in the back of their house?
Yeah. There's a joke to go with that, and I won't go into it now.
Don't.
So, Rabbi, I have a first cousin who went to Spain just to work. Well, not to work, but she was a musician. She started working, and she tried to extend her visa. She did it once and then wanted to do it again or try to become a citizen. And they said if she could prove that she was from Sephardic background, they will automatically give her citizenship. Well, I'm the one in the family that does the ancestry, and she's not Sephardic as far back as like 4 generations. But she finally gave up. There was no way that they were going to let her stay there. But she was there for a couple of years. She would come home and then have to go back again to renew her visa. And she finally gave up.
I saw that they were offering that. Like, I think a bunch of the EU countries were also like, my grandfather is from Poland. I was thinking maybe I should get an EU passport. A Polish country, right? Poland.
We tried.
And what happened?
Your relatives have had to have moved. In other words, go to the United States when Poland was a country. So after 1918.
Yeah, so I would have been able.
They immigrated before 1918. they don't count
Russia.
because they were under, yeah.
Right. I would be able to do that. My grandfather left during the war, but I didn't do it. Who wants a
And
Polish
you're okay. It's good for the kids wanted it because
Polish passport. I mean, the Poles were very not kind to us Jews. I don't need a Polish passport.
well, they only wanted, I didn't want it. My children wanted me to get one because once I got it, then they could get it. And that way they'd had the EU passport and they could travel and get all the EU. And I told them, well, we weren't eligible.
I want to bring the conversation back to Issy. I want to hear more about the movie, not the Jewish law part. I'm curious what others think about it.
The movie with the what you brought up, whether the Miranos are Jewish or not, the Inquisition began in 1496, and Jews, we know, went underground to hide their religion. So 200 years later, how do descendants prove? The only proof they've got is maybe the parents and grandparents had certain traditions, Shabbat candles or whatever it is, or whatever they could practice. Similar to what happened in Germany in the Second World War. The Jews went underground, they went into hiding. So many were taken in by churches and convents and all that, so they could survive. So there is a problem of identifying who's Jewish, whether they're Marrano or not, because of circumstances.
Right.
You know, there was a Spanish scholar. I'm a Spanish teacher. So anyway, there was a Spanish scholar. His name was Damaso Alonso, and he did an investigation into the backgrounds and ancestry of the most Catholic king and queen, Isabel y Fernando, and they found out that they had Jewish blood, which you're never going to hear.
Do you believe that?
So
Christopher Columbus
the
too.
feeling of everybody was common.
Did you tell me the difference, again, they said it in before, but between crypto Jews and Marranos? I know it was stated in your talk, Issy, but I can't recall exactly.
Hold on a second. Carry on. I'm going to find.
I want to add something I thought was interesting. In the movie, when you learn about this captain, he actually goes through a proper conversion. So he already, on his own Jewish sort of observance, he knows that there's you have to prove that you're Jewish. He still embarks on this mission because he realizes if they are going to learn their true heritage, which he really believes, and I think I also believe it. I think many of us believe it. They would still need to go through a conversion afterwards. So he's sort of embarking on this mission to bring them back to their, I guess, heritage, knowing that they're going to have to go through a conversion process as well.
Don't you think this would?
I'm going to share the screen now.
Okay.
I'll just hold on a second. Hold on. Okay. Right. So this was the page on. So we should make a distinction between crypto Jews and Marranos. Crypto Jews are when Jews have been persecuted and had to hide their Judaism. Marranos are those who are simply ignorant of their Judaism. So that was the difference.
Who?
They weren't totally.
That's not really true.
But that's not totally.
That's not really true.
Because they were practicing, in many cases, they were practicing in secret, so they had some idea that they were different.
Or didn't Marranos convert to Christianity and practice their Judaism in secret?
Yes.
That's the difference.
Right.
I'm going to put you on speaker so it's easy to hear.
By the way, for those of you who do know Terry Taubman, she has a really fascinating piece of silver in her home that if you start taking it apart, it has basically every single Jewish holiday.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Ishka, Havdalah. I'm trying to see if I have a picture of it. I know it's not something, unless you go to her house, she doesn't take it out. It's never been like in a museum.
I mean, and then you have the advent of everybody now looks into Ladino, which is Spanish, and
DNA supplement.
part of food, you know, and it's really beautiful. Really beautiful. I have to tell you that the first piece of written Spanish literature ends in a couplet which is called Harchas, which was completely in Hebrew.
Now, I can add a story about having to have your Jewishness proven.
The Walgreens, which is at 32nd and Shea, 9-6.
Tell the person to switch off their to mute.
I think it was Ellen. Stuart, go ahead.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Can you hear me? I don't know.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Because I'm not on Zoom. I'm doing it differently. When we got married in Israel, Avia and I, they accepted Avia as being Jewish, but they wanted proof that I was Jewish. So my father apparently found the Moihel who circumcised me, who was an Orthodox Jew, and he wrote a letter to the rabbis in Israel, and then I was kosher. And I was already in the middle of my medical school career, and I had been in the public health service. I don't know how old this guy must have been, but whatever he wrote worked.
Thank God he was alive.
Yeah.
Hey.
Mute yourself, Avia.
Avia, yeah, go ahead. You're on mute. You can go ahead, Avia. No.
Can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Stuart, we can't hear Avia.
Avia, click on the microphone in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. And that should unmute it.
No, she's muted. I think she's selecting the wrong microphone.
Up to the top.
Up to the top.
Upper
Right.
No, not the way we're doing it.
Oh, not the way you're doing it?
Because we don't have Zoom. We're using the browser. I'm going to go to the other room and I'll help her.
Okay.
Oh, she can come to you.
No, she not. He has to help her. On her, he knows what to do.
All right, as long as she has tech support there, it's good.
Right, in-house tech support.
Yeah, it could be that they need to allow the browser access to the microphone because she's unmuted. Microphone's not.
Maybe I missed it in the movie.
One of our Sephardic friends gave me a Haggadah. One side is in English and one side is in Spanish.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I have a question. Who wrote, or does anybody know, or did the movie bring out, who wrote the note about the captain that caused him to be disgraced from the army?
They don't specifically say who it was, but it was, I think it had something to do when he had that group of kids and he circumcised them, gave them all a bris. And that's when the rumor was put out that he was doing things unbecoming to regular people. That was when it came out. Who did it? It was an inside job.
Thank you.
Avia, you can talk. No, she's not there. No, we can't hear.
Avia, we can't hear you.
I can.
Can't hear you. Stuart, we still can't hear her.
It won't help if you scream.
Go to Stuart's computer and use it.
By the way, just so you know, you can also dial in if you ever come on a computer and your mic's not working, you could do audio from a phone and video from your computer.
So I have to tell you, in doing research for this movie, it wasn't easy because there's not a lot of information available. And the email I got from the synagogue there was helpful. They came back to me within 24 hours with the thing, and then we tried to find out if there's a Chabad in Oporto, and there is not. But there's a Chabad in Lisbon in Portugal, and Levi and I tried to get hold of the rabbi there, but he never answered us. So we wanted to find out what's going on from their side. Avia, did you get your microphone working?
Does your husband let you on his computer?
She did not, but she wanted to tell the story that not only I needed a letter, but she needed a letter saying that she was not already married. So she was working for the Jewish committee in New York at the time, and somebody there wrote the letter that attested to the fact that they knew her and she's not married. Also, the rabbi, whose name I've forgotten, the Sephardic, the Converso rabbi, are you there? I've lost my picture.
Yeah. Rabbi Garcia.
Yeah, anyway, he also pointed out that, he felt he was Jewish and didn't have to convert, but his wife went through conversion, so there'd be no question about their children.
When Pinky and I got married, the rabbi in South Africa had a question, not from me, but from Pinky, because her parents come from Germany and they had no paperwork. And eventually, it's too long ago for me to tell you what they produced. Maybe they wanted to make sure she got married. So they produced something that the rabbi accepted, and we got married. Whatever it was a good piece of paper. So anyhow, the next movie that we're going to do is going to be The Life Ahead with Sophia Loren. And for those of you who want extra viewing assignments, there's a 1977 movie called Madame Rosa with Simone Signoret, who got an Oscar for it. It's only available on YouTube to watch it. It's a very bad copy. The subtitles are white on a very white background. The movie's in French, but if you watch it for half an hour, it's eerie that it's the same movie, same script as The Life Ahead. So it's called Madame Rosa.
It's hard to read the subtitles because they're in white.
Yeah. So, and it's also very difficult because it's such an old copy. Really, it looks like it might have been filmed off a movie screen and then uploaded. That's how bad it is. But it gives you a good idea if you've seen The Life Ahead and going to see this. It's a good comparison. So,
Izzy, should we try the poll?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, this is something new. We haven't tried this. But if you can try answering this, this is a test.
How do you do this with your
finger?
So you should be able to touch it with your.
Okay. Yeah. Our problem is we got to remember that there's 2 hours difference.
I put it in the email though for you. Special.
I know you do. I know you do, but we've got to remember because we are, like
it used to be 3 hours.
Right. Adele, I'm not sure if you're 2 hours ahead or 1 hour ahead with that land.
Well, I had to call Issy to find out he said that your 11 o'clock meant my 1 o'clock.
So right now is 2 o'clock by you?
Yeah,
One.
2:05.
All right, so you're
Where
on.
are you, Adele? Where are you?
I'm in Atlanta.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
Yes, it's
Georgia, where
2:05.
the big runoffs are.
Yes, exactly. By the way, we gave money for the,
Oh, John Ossoff?
yes, and the minister, yes.
Yes, John Office was interviewed last night on I'm a Poor, you know,
Yes,
I'm
yes.
a Poor. Yeah.
Get it today. Her
Oh.
show was done also today.
You'll like it.
Yeah.
So this was just so everyone sees.
Wow, you got the results already.
Yeah, this is
Better than an election poll.
I exactly.
More accurate, right?
And all the votes have been counted.
All 6 of them, huh?
Oh, we're still counting. Till
That's right.
tomorrow night, midnight.
I know.
Here's another question for those of you who, this is again, just because we made the poll up, so we figured we'd,
Wow.
is, it's a good thing though that they don't do elections on Zoom.
Starts with education.
Hackable.
I voted.
Listen, the only way you can hack this poll is if you log in with your iPad, your computer, and your phone, and that gives you 3 votes.
And we don't ask for ID. There's no voter ID here, so.
Yeah.
And no proof of Judaism.
Right.
Very true. Very good, Adele.
All are welcome here.
No signature.
No signature verification either, exactly.
All right. The movie brings up a very important question. Who is a Jew?
Exactly.
Is it Jew because is it a religion or is it your bloodline? If you're a Jew and you have the good bloodline, you don't practice, are you really a Jew? What are you? You're nothing. You're not practicing anything. And you may not have the bloodline, but if you practice.
If you click on these 3 buttons, see there?
I have to tell you that when our nephew's son was born in California, he had a bris, and noticed the pictures. They had Chabad rabbis come to do the bris,
And his wife is Korean.
and they and we said, really? And the Chabad rabbi said, you never know. Never know. And he just celebrated his bar mitzvah in California.
Now, I know they've raised the kid Jewish. I never asked if she actually converted.
Converted, right.
I honestly don't know.
By the way, that's a great example. I wonder, like, I wonder if they wrote a bris letter.
They could have. They could have. Yeah.
Or it could be that they didn't in that situation. You know what I mean? It's interesting.
In this particular case, the bar mitzvah was a Reformed congregation.
Right. No, I'm saying for the bris, like,
For the bris.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, these are all tough questions as a Jewish people.
I have to tell you that the moil that we used for our first son, his name was Pesach Krohn, because all of his family had holiday names. So his name was Rabbi Pesach Krohn.
I don't know if he had a sister Hanukkah or not.
Well, my Machutin is Pesach. His name is Pesach, so it's not so unusual.
There you go.
Well, you think it's good that in Israel, if you actually cannot prove if you're Jewish, documented, that people have to go to Cyprus to get married. I think it makes bad feelings. People who want to be Jewish, and then they're like pushing them away to be a Jew.
All right, here's a new question from Issy. By the way, I've noticed there's a single no answer for all of our questions, but I don't get names, so you just know these are anonymous, which we appreciate. So,
yes, we're politically correct.
Well, I mean, I don't even think Zoom gives me an option to see names, so it's not like I'm saying that and I could change it.
No,
listen, I'll admit to it. I was testing the system. So
I think your comment is valid because we have a good friend of ours whose son went to Aliyah, and he had to get documentation that he was a Jew. and it was really unbelievable.
Right. They make it very difficult.
Right. And there are people, just to add to that, that won't even get married in Israel for that very reason. I'm talking about Israelis. They won't even attempt it. They're like, they're not interested in having to prove. So they just get married in Cyprus, and it's cheaper and it works. So it is a known, it is a known.
Are they living in sin in Israel though?
Well, I have a friend, now deceased, unfortunately, who married a non-Jew who did not convert, but they were married somehow by a rabbi. Then they adopted 2 children who did go into the mikveh, so they were Jewish. But they made Aliyah to Israel, and before they left, they went to be remarried by a rabbi who they felt was accepted in Israel as a bona fide rabbi. By this time, her husband had converted, and they wanted to make sure there'd be no questions about anyone's Jewishness when they were in Israel. That was interesting.
I have a question, if anyone can answer it. I'm Jewish, I think since Sinai. Anyhow, I'm married out. My son and daughter, are they Jewish? I mean, could they get into Israel even though their father wasn't Jewish?
100%.
My mother.
100%?
Yeah, in Israel, even if the father was the one that's Jewish, they'd be able to get in.
Really?
But your kids are 100% Jewish.
I thought it was matrilineal.
It is, but for Israel, the country, you can get citizenship if your father was Jewish. It doesn't make you
Would
Jewish.
Would you be accepted by the Orthodox community as being Jewish? Probably not, I would imagine.
You'd be accepted in Israel to become a citizen.
Citizen.
Think about birthright. The birthright trips, you only need a single parent to be Jewish.
That's right. That's right.
So that's a good example of how it plays out. You get a free trip, you know, and a love for Israel, which is what they want to foster.
Right.
Okay, here's an addition.